An international media storm has erupted as US President Donald Trump threatens to sue the BBC for $1 billion, claiming the broadcaster's edited footage distorted his role in the January 6 Capitol riot. Let's head to America now. We're joined by Oz Sultan from the Sultan Interactive Group. Good to see you. How serious do you think Trump's billion-dollar lawsuit threat against the BBC is?
It's very, very serious. We've seen in the past that misrepresentation by news outlets has resulted in not just legal action, but in settlements, right? And this is within the United States. Now, this becomes an international issue, but because the BBC does broadcast and has affiliates within the United States, this is something that could potentially be adjudicated here. And given the fact that we've already had a resignation at the BBC, pretty much saying, yeah, we edited that to fit a narrative, this isn't news reporting. This is, this is kind of like 1940s propaganda.
Yeah, what do you think the chances of success would be given what we've seen in the US? It's one thing for the US. What about a British broadcaster?
If this is brought to court in the United States, I think there's a good chance that it'd be forced into a settlement. I don't think anyone wants this to go to a jury trial. If this ends up in a British court, that could be altogether very different, because under Commonwealth law, they would look at the damages a slightly different way. They'd also look at, how this impacted the president. And I'm not sure how they would really assess damages in that case. But I think it could be equally as detrimental to the BBC if this were to take place in a British court versus here. I also think that given the fact that the United States just joined the Commonwealth as a junior partner, after we had that whole tea thing in 1776 and kicked the Brits out, I think there would be some impetus on Starmer and the UK government's part to look at this a little bit more seriously.
Talk to us about what actually happened here, the BBC's edit change in the Panorama documentary about January 6, which went to air just before the presidential election. What did the BBC actually do here?
So they did two things. One was that they trimmed interviews so that it specifically fit a narrative. And two is that they edited the context of how those interviews and also the video of the Jan 6th event was telecast. So by doing this and by typecasting Trump and by typecasting MAGA supporters, and by also kind of spinning a narrative that was supported by the bias in their editing, they created I don't know how much of a groundswell this was here, but I know that this definitely created a maelstrom on Twitter in the past, leading up to the election, about everything that was going on in America, and that doesn't bode well for international relations, and it just definitely doesn't bode well for voters being well informed.
And it obviously led to a massive backlash against the BBC, as well as an internal document was leaked suggesting that there are some questions about how the BBC handles these sorts of things as well. BBC's leadership now resigning and apologising. Do you think it suggests deeper editorial problems inside an organisation like the BBC?
I think it suggests beyond editorial problems. I think it suggests that there's leadership oversight to create narratives that aren't necessarily accurate or reality. And because they want to present a perspective that is theirs and not what reality sort of shows, one could pretty much deduce that it's not just bias, it's malice. And I think that the damages in this case are going to be dependent upon how much malice did we identify here. And I'd say there's a pretty fair amount of malice if you're getting multiple resignations at the top.
Deborah Turness actually is British, had been at ITV, but actually was the first female president of NBC News for quite some time. She saw the departure of Matt Lauer, also Brian Williams, as you'll recall as well. She would be known to Donald Trump.
She would be, and I think if it comes down to it, her opinion and her involvement in whatever the narrative crafting of this was is more than likely to get subpoenaed. And that's where I think that this is going to head to some sort of a settlement, if it does get to that, as opposed to a court trial, because this would the century, dragging the media through the muck that they created themselves. And I don't think they want that.
Yeah, yeah. All right, now a political rift is widening in Washington. 8 Senate Democrats broke ranks to back a Republican bill ending the government shutdown, a move that's ignited anger within their own party, as you may imagine. Oz, what drove the Senate Democrats to side with the Republican on ending the shutdown?
So the interesting thing about this was that the big clincher for Democrats happened to focus around the Affordable Care Act and the want of Democrats to extend health care benefits to a large number of illegals who, again, raise the cost of health care and also at the same point in time reduce the amount of health care servicing that gets provided to our local constituents. I know this because I'm elected in Harlem and I see the direct impacts of this. But the challenge was that they thought that they could hold off Republicans long enough to not just swing things through the election, but also to get what they wanted, which was extensions on the Affordable Care Act, additional monies allocated to that. That didn't happen. They brokered a truce in between Senate Democrats, and now we're watching the Democratic Party eat their own. I mean, I'm already getting messages from multiple, because I subscribe to both Democrat and Republican think tank, thoughty pieces, I guess you could call it. and the Dems are already saying, how do we put together these symposiums and not eating our own?
Yeah.
And I'm like, if that's where you are right now, this is really a sad state of affairs. You have Democratic socialists on one side pushing you, to policies that you may or may not espouse. You have centrist liberals kind of getting thrown under the bus. And now you've got calls for Chuck Schumer, who's one of the longest standing senators in Congress, to be replaced. Right, and it's more than likely that he's going to be primaried this year.
Well, it is a situation where obviously President Trump has been very much behind this, waiting it out. Let's hear what he had to say.
Well, it depends what deal we're talking about. But if it's a deal I heard about, that's certainly, they want to change the deal a little bit. But I would say so. I think based on everything I'm hearing, they haven't changed anything, and we have support from enough Democrats. And we're going to be opening up our country. It's too bad it was closed, but we'll be opening up our country very quickly.
All right, that's President Trump's perspective. But Oz, there's no doubt that this has done damage to the presidency, to Republicans. There's been a lot of frustration.
Oh, absolutely.
Last week, look how Democrats performed in those mayoral elections, including obviously New York City.
Not just the mayoral elections. Earl Sears lost in Virginia for the gubernatorial. We lost Jack Ciattarelli in New Jersey for the gubernatorial. So, there was a bit of a referendum. And I think it is the American people are a little bit tired of the infighting. But the blame game has, inside of the media cycle, pretty much focused on the Republicans and not the fact that Democrats were unflinching and willing to submit the American people to the injustice of not having SNAP benefits, not having, existent health care provisioning, simply because they wanted to cover a group of illegals. And I think that's something that unfortunately won't get contended with, but it's the fact of the situation. And that's getting spun in every direction, every which way. Blaming the Republicans, blaming other Democrats, blaming the Democrats inside of themselves.
Yeah, and obviously there's a lot of people in the market, investors, hoping the shutdown ends to get their hands on some of that data, economic data, to show exactly what is going on with the economy in the US, because there's a lot happening at the moment. Oz Sultan, appreciate your time unpacking it all with us today. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thanks.